welcome back to the Now Morning Show. We are live here at TTT Live online and the Now Morning Show fan page on Facebook as well. And that was Calypso Rose with No Mister. And of course, we played Calypso Rose because we're heading across to Tobago to do some post-budget analysis. Right here, it's Budget Talks on Now.
As Rocker said, we are speaking of the budget, and we are going to speak about the post-budget analysis when it comes to the budget allotment for Tobago. With me this morning via Zoom is the Deputy Chief Secretary and Secretary of Finance and the Economy, Assemblyman Joel Jack. Good morning.
Hi, good morning, Carrie. Let me say good morning, all of Trinidad. Good morning, all of Tobago. It's my pleasure to be on this morning.
And it is our pleasure to have you here with us again. So now, we spoke before the budget, and we spoke about some of the expectations and some of the things that you would have liked to have seen in the budget. Now that the budget has been presented, what is your take on the $2.134 billion allotment for Tobago?
Well, first of all, let me start off by complimenting the Minister of Finance on his team on a well-crafted budget presentation. And I must also thank the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance and his team for their continued support as we continue to implement programs for the continued development of the island, and as well the development that will redound to the benefit of national economic development. In terms of the allocation to the Assembly as it relates to the recurrent expenditure side, we are fairly happy with the allocation in terms of us being able to manage. As it relates to the development program side, what we'll have to do is to reprioritize and recalibrate to ensure that we treat with some of the shortfall on the development program side. And I think in treating with it, what the Minister has done for us quite well is to agree for the Tobago House of Assembly to pursue our alternative financing modality. And what that would result in is the Tobago House of Assembly raising funding outside of our direct subventions on the capital market to fund our public sector investment program. And I want to applaud the Minister because since coming into office, he has agreed that the Assembly should pursue this modality, and this will see us raising funds on the bond market, accelerating the rollout of a public-private partnership initiative, which was also featured heavily in the budget. And as well, we will get the necessary support from the Ministry of Finance to access funding in the sum of 108 or so million TT dollars from the CAF Guyana Development Bank to pursue coastal infrastructure work. So in that context, I think taken together, I think all of Tobago should be proud and should applaud the Minister for the budget presentation and for his support for Tobago and the Tobago House of Assembly. Additionally, we are earmarked to have approximately 754 million TT dollars spent in Tobago by ministries and other statutory bodies on the island in keeping with their responsibilities outlined in the 6th schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act. So taken together, $2.134 billion, $754 million that will be spent by ministries in Tobago on projects that we have sat around the table and agreed on as it relates to the island's development. And additionally, the additional funding of approximately $400 million via our alternative financing modality really augurs well for the continued advancement and development of the island as we continue to ensure that the pace of the island's development momentum continues, and to ensure that any investment in Tobago, especially in capital and our development program and investment in capital goods, redounds to the benefit of the country and ensures that Tobago increases, that we increase our contribution to national economic activity.
When it comes to the economic activity, the Minister did outline in his budget presentation on Tobago that there has been a decline in economic activity, and there needs to be some sort of focus on bolstering the economic activity. What is the focus and the use of the budget toward that end?
Well, the minister was quite right, because as a direct result of the pandemic, we are projecting a 15% decline in GDP year on year. Our figures, when I presented the budget in June, indicated an increase, a return to growth over the 2018, over the 2019 calendar year, in terms of a 1.4% increase in GDP. And all indicators pointed to continued growth year on year in fiscal 20, in calendar year 2020. But what we saw coming around March or so, as the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw significant cancellations and decreases in the tourism sector. And that sector was directly impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we anticipate year on year across globally, we in terms of the figures, our projections indicate a 15% decline in economic activity on the island as a direct result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The sectors that will be impacted, of course, tourism. We anticipate some declines in the financial services sector and other sectors. However, we are seeing positive increases as it relates to the agricultural sector. And given the structure of the Tobago economy, where the government expenditure accounts for 44% of economic activity, with increased expenditure, we should see a return to positive growth in 2021. And all the indicators point to a return to growth, and that is why we are working diligently with the Minister of Finance to ensure that some of the sectors that are directly impacted by the pandemic, that will institute the necessary measures that will accelerate the pace of the island's economic recovery and a restoration to some continued and sustained growth.
As you rightly said, the COVID-19 pandemic has adversely affected tourism, which we all know, especially in Tobago. Being that Tobago is so heavily reliant on tourism, do you believe that the budget allotment would be used to prop up the tourism industry rather than helping it to move forward?
Well, in terms of our the initial data for this year, from January to say February, early March, pointed to increased tourist arrivals, especially on the domestic side, international air arrivals and cruise arrivals. All our targets pointed to continued growth in the tourism sector. And because we had to institute the necessary measures to arrest the COVID-19 pandemic, we had to close the borders,
right.
We had to restrict inter-island air travel, we had to we had to limit arrivals by cruise. These measures directly impacted the tourism sector. And what we have done, even prior to the government, working with the central government in terms of assisting the tourism sector, the government, you may recall, allocated to the Assembly $50 million in direct grant funding to the tourism sector. And as well, we have implemented a number of measures to support the ancillary tourism sector on the island directly from the Assembly. And as well, we have implemented a number of measures to support businesses across the Assembly, not only the tourism sector. So we have implemented measures prior to the budget, and the allocation to the tourism agency, the allocation to the tourism division will continue, and to first implement the necessary measures that will see an early recovery in the tourism sector. And our direct focus moving forward in the calendar year 2020 and moving forward in fiscal 2021, our focus will be directly on the domestic tourism market. Because for us, the domestic market is an important source market in terms of our revenue, and we'll be focusing on the domestic tourism market in the first instance. What we have seen prior to when the lockdown measures were reinstituted, a number of properties on the island, they were accounting arrivals and figures of upwards of 75%. And if this is an indicator as to what will be happening even during this period, once we have the borders closed, we should see a return to these increase in numbers in terms of the rates at the hotels. And this is a positive and promising sign for the sector, even in the midst of this challenging period. A number of our friends and families in Trinidad came across either via the ferry or Caribbean Airlines, and what we saw when those measures, the lockdown measures, were removed early on, we saw the domestic tourism market really supplementing and filling the gap for international arrivals and cruise ship passengers.
Which is great news, of course. Now, I know the government and the THA have been working closely together, especially when it comes to the budget and the allotment. Let's speak now on entrepreneurship and SMEs.
Most definitely. We are excited as to some of the incentive programs implemented in the budget, especially as it relates to the ICT sector. You may recall that the SME sector has been the focus of this administration since coming into office in 2001. You may recall that we implemented the Enterprise Assistance Grant and the Enterprise Assistance Fund programs to provide very vital and essential funding to entrepreneurs to start their businesses. And we have seen a number of successes in these areas, and we'll continue to provide the necessary support to the SME sector. We have also worked with the government in terms of instituting the liquidity support programs for credit unions with the intention to unlend to a number of entrepreneurs and to persons in small business on the island. Additionally, as it relates to the loan guarantee program that is currently being managed by First Citizens, again, we have instituted necessary support measures for SME sector during the COVID-19 pandemic. And additionally, the ancillary sector as well received an allocation from the Tobago House of Assembly of 10 million TT dollars as well during this period. And moving forward with the necessary measures outlined in the budget, and as well as the measures outlined by the Executive Council during this COVID-19 pandemic and during my budget statement in June of this year, the SME sector will receive greater support. It was earlier this week I met as well with the Minister of Trade, Senator Paula Gopi-Schoon, and again we are outlining measures to assist those SMEs on the island, those who are the operations are geared to the export market and not just export in
Deputy Chief Secretary,
regional international context, but export in the Trinidad context. And we are seeing a number of our entrepreneurs and our products in Trinidad. So persons, those guys, those ladies who are looking for the left-hand dumpling, although we have not mastered that as yet, what we have is a number of products like the frozen dumpling, pone mixes, and a number of other Tobago products holding their own on shelves in the supermarkets in Trinidad.
And that's a step in the right direction. Deputy Chief Secretary, we do have to stick a pin in it for now because we have a hard stop for the news at the top of the hour. But I want to thank you for joining us this morning and giving us this very needed information on Tobago and the budget allotment. We are now going to take a break and we'll come back after the news. This is In Our Morning Show.